Welcome to True View with Julie and Jamie. We're so excited that you're with us today. And today's topic that we're going to look at is something I think that affects a lot of people in their marriages, and that is women having respect for their husbands in their marriage. And I don't know about you, Jamie, but that certainly seems to be something that, as I have been with women in Bible studies and counseled them, that tends to be an issue that affects a lot of different people.
I definitely have seen that as well. And when it comes to respect, I mean, the Bible calls us to respect our husbands. And at the same time, I hear things like, well, he doesn't say what he doesn't do what he says he's going to do, or he doesn't communicate with me. And then on top of that, we have this whole issue, and it's been going on forever, really, but the demasculinization of men in our culture through sitcoms. And what I mean by that is often if you watch sitcoms and how men are portrayed.
Or even commercials. I mean, I even find it a lot of times in those commercials, I just am like going, they're denigrating to men.
Well, they just make them look stupid. The dumb guy, he's aloof, he's out of shape, he doesn't have any respect from his kids, he's a poor disciplinarian. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
He's the butt of most of the jokes in a lot of the sitcoms and the commercials.
Just an idiot dad.
And don't think that that's not intentional. I mean, there is, and the one who we know who's really behind it, I think, is the one who, from, again, the garden, was trying to set things up to be, that the woman becomes the one who is the influencer and trying to take control and make the man feel like, I know better than you what we should be doing, even if clearly there's been given a word. So it's definitely a long-standing problem, and even the fact that, we have admonitions in the Word about it lets us know that this is an issue that's been contending. But again, just like in a lot of things, it seems to be on an accelerated pitch of trying to make men feel like they really don't have a place in the home. They're not smart, they're not that head like we really are supposed to have them be the head of the home.
God says that the man is to be the head of the household, and yet we definitely see what God says the world, or what I say the world with God's word calls the world, is always opposite of that.
Always.
So if God says the man is to lead the house, then we should not be at all surprised when we're seeing movies and sitcoms or commercials and other things making men look completely incapable of even being able to keep a house together.
That's right.
Or even do a simple task because they make fun of, the lazy guy. But then on the other hand, we also have the issue with women when they are getting bombarded with that in their world around them and in the media and in the movies and on TV like we discussed. But you also have where if you're sitting around a coffee house, many times, Julie, you'll hear women just berating their husbands.
Oh, it's so sad. And it's hard to be around that. And even if you don't feel that way towards your husband, not to join in with that kind of haranguing, because you want to be a part of the rest of the women. And, it's that whole breeding that, discontent breeds more discontent. And so if you're around, you begin to look at your, your spouse through different eyes. And you might even have been like, that wasn't that big deal, but you might have heard Mary Jane talking about her husband and how he never has finished any projects, and you go, wow, my husband hasn't finished that project either. And you begin to become more critical, and that whole what you focus on expands.
Or I don't really see that my husband has any ambition.
Yes.
He's lazy, he's unreliable. And I have to tell you, this one really gets me, is when they just say, oh my gosh, he's like having another child.
Yes. Yeah.
Your husband is not your child.
And if you treat him as being one, he's going to start acting like one. And then it's going to be harder to respect someone when you have been part of putting him into that very mode of at that point in time, if you're speaking down to him, if you are haranguing, being critical, being grumbling about him, it's going to be pretty hard for him to be that person, because it's almost like you take someone and you're just continually, berating to the point where they feel little.
They do feel little. And then, you've got your magazines and different messages that I believe are very much in our culture that just say, just dump him.
Oh,
Just dump him.
That's one of the
you
first
can find
things.
a better one.
That's right.
You know, you deserve
Trade
better.
him. What are you doing putting up with that? There's no way you should be I would never put up with that.
I would. That's a good. That's
and then you
infamous.
begin to think, obviously, there's something wrong with me, because if my friend
Gosh,
says she
all my
wouldn't put up
friends-
with it, then I've got to be the one that must be the loser to hang around with this
And you know
guy.
what? You need to just move on, because he'll never change.
Oh, that is
what a
such
lie that is. I mean, God's word tells us we should always be changing and growing to be better when we're in relationship with him. So the lie to say he'll never change is just,
Well, that's like looking
it's like having no hope.
Very much that way. And for us to understand that if we can trust God to be the one that can resurrect an individual life, he's still in the life-saving business today, and he can resurrect a marriage that even looks like it's dead. And I know myself what God has done in my own marriage of almost 34 years, and how he has been able to transform it. But more than that, I know countless other women who, when they have applied God's word and really look to God to be the one that is directing their paths in their marriage, it has literally transformed their world. And I think that's just so important for us to be able to say it is not a place of hopelessness, but there is such hope that today you can have a marriage that you really feel is on the rocks, but God is absolutely more than able to put you on firm foundation. And I will just say again that my marriage, I would say, is probably one of the best marriages that I know out there. But there was a time when it wasn't, because we weren't really standing on God's word in our marriage. But when we did, and we began to apply God's word, it literally has revolutionized our lives. And I think I was one of those people at one time that would have thought, oh, the best way to deal with this is just to get out, go on. And I think now that I have 4 grown children, I look and think those lies that Satan was telling me were not just to destroy my husband and my relationship, but even more importantly, it was in order to get at my 4 precious children, because had I believed those lies, I would never have continued on. And I see how they have grown in a far more stable, nurturing, loving environment because we made a commitment to stay together.
And that commitment is a big deal. You know, Ephesians 5:33 says, however, each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. And right there we just see a beautiful picture of really what God has for the marriage. And the command that he gives within that marriage is that a husband is to love his wife like Christ loved the church. You know, and Christ died for the church.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, we are not up here pretending that maybe your husband really does watch too much TV. And we're not pretending that there are no things that you would like to see improved in your marriage, or that behaviors that you would like to see changed in your husband. But what we are here to say is that God gives us the command as wives, and wives must respect her husband. There is no if. It doesn't say,
that's right,
wives, respect your husband if ...
That's right.
There is no if. And you know, I go through the book of Proverbs often with my children, Julie, and we go through and I just explain
such
it.
Such wisdom, and how blessed your children are to be instructed in that at this point in their lives where it will stick with them forever.
Well, thank you. But as soon as I learned on my own journey that, you know, this book of Proverbs was written by what God was considering the wisest man, the wisest human man to have lived, I thought, well, what better than do I want to make sure my kids know than this wisdom? And so as we were going through it, we got to Proverbs 21:9, and I have to read it. It says, it is better to dwell on the corner of a housetop. It's better to dwell on the corner of a roof than it is to dwell with a nagging wife. And I have to tell you, just to kind of make the point, I asked my son Zachary, he's my oldest, I said, so describe to me, what would it be like to live on the corner of a roof?
Great question.
You know, and he goes, well, that would be really bad if it rained. And that would be really bad if it was like windy. And he goes, but I'll tell you what would be the worst.
What was that?
If you wake up on the wrong side of the bed.
I love the sense of humor. That's
and I thought that would be bad.
That would definitely be bad.
But for God to actually say, and this is like a warning for men out there, listen, it would be better for you to live on the corner of a rooftop than to be with a nagging wife. And yet, so often women can fall into that trap of thinking that by nagging, they can just wear them down.
Absolutely.
And to get what they want.
And we can
making
be so
again,
biting
about
sometimes in our comments, and it becomes that whole thing of that critical, judgmental spirit that comes into play, and you begin to go, I don't want to be around someone who's constantly being critical of me. And so I can really imagine that if you are that woman who is continually berating or, just even your tone of voice that doesn't show respect, your husband is not going to really want to be around you, and it just perpetuates some of the very problems you have where you go, well, he's never around, he's, watching TV all the time, he, is going off on every time and watching the games or playing the games or going fishing or hunting and being gone, and you're going, some of that may also have to do with the fact that are you creating an environment where he wants to be around? Are you affirming him? Are you respecting him? And I think, again, we're so me-centered that so often we think, well, when he starts loving me, I'll respect him. But somebody's got to stop that chain of that circle that is going on so often. And it becomes that place of when you start respecting him, you'd be amazed at the love you're going to start seeing.
Well, it's easier to love someone. We all could agree, and I think with that it's easier to love someone who is respectful of you, and it's really about what you focus on expands.
Absolutely.
So if we continue to focus on the faults, and imagine that, we're not perfect women.
You're not? I can't believe that, Jamie.
I'm sorry if that's a shock. But we're not perfect women, and if we had that where someone was constantly just picking out our faults,
I wouldn't want to be around.
No, and it's difficult because, like you said, it does create that cycle where there's no respect, and that lack of respect makes it difficult for him to show love. And really what we want to get to today is how can we create that type of marriage that is exactly the picture of marriage that God originally designed and created and wants for us to have, which is a loving, peaceful environment where both of you feel as though your needs are being met.
Jamie, one of the things that so impressed me when we first met, close to 7 years ago. It's hard to believe how quickly it's gone on, but the way you described your husband literally made me think, I want to meet this man. He must be the most amazing person on the universe. And I, unfortunately, when I say this, was so taken aback because I thought, in all my years, I don't know that I've ever heard anyone give such laudatory comments, and your face would just light up as you talked about him. And I thought, in all of our time together, I've never heard you say a critical word, a negative word about Mike. What I have heard are he is so amazing. I have the best husband in the world. You wouldn't believe what Mike just did. He is this and that. And it really is that place I thought, I know he's not perfect, but the way you affirm him to him himself, but also to other people, it's that whole, if you're speaking that about him, it becomes where you see him that way, he starts to become that way.
Mm-hmm. And the tongue has such power.
It sure
because that's
does.
really what you're describing there, is that the scripture tells us that our tongue has the power of life and death in it.
Right.
And what that means is through our tongue and the words that we choose to use, we can either breathe life into a situation or breathe death to a situation. And so you're right. My husband is not perfect, and yet I know that the value it brings to me and to him to focus on that which is good. And
That's
there
right.
is so much that's good. And sometimes I know, you could spend a weekend with the Lord on a women's retreat, and then on your drive home, you're already thinking about, oh, I bet he didn't do this, and I bet he didn't do that. And all of that you just poured in to love the Lord, and then you arrive home, and what does that really say about who God is, or your own faith and belief in the Word and the things that God's trying to do in your life? I have just heard women on the phone with me do that very thing where they're setting themselves up for a fight. They're planning
Absolutely.
it before they even arrive, instead of thinking, I am so grateful that my husband allowed me to have this time, or allowed me to do this, and choosing then to focus on those positive attributes.
And that is so much of it, Jamie. It is a choice. When we say what you focus on expands, that's so true. And that can be for the negative, but it sure can be for the positive too. If you're looking and praise. There is such power in the praises, both that which we give to God, but also when we look and say, thank you, Lord. I have a husband. B, I have one who is providing for the home. And even if he's unemployed, there are things that you can find for which you can always be thankful. There was something that attracted you to that person when you first got married, and focus on those things. Like, even in the book of Revelations to the church of Ephesus, the Lord says, return to your first love, do the things you once did. And that's in relationship to Him. But that's such great advice if you're married and have that. Wow, when we first started dating, there were things that your husband did that you were like, oh, and you saw him completely differently than you usually do once that ring is on your hand.
That's right. Do you know how much I loved football when I was dating my husband? I got to tell you, I could watch games for an entire day. We never talk
about that now, Jamie. So something, that's interesting.
I'm just telling you, I know just from talking with women, and I've talked to women who are definitely struggling in their marriages. And when I heard that, I was talking with this one woman, she started describing to me why she was being tempted to have an affair. And as she described what that temptation was like and how much more fun it was to kind of have this other thing going on over here, that conversation drove me right to sit down with a piece of paper and think, what did I do when we were dating?
Great.
That did get me all those butterflies that I got excited about, where I definitely took more time getting ready, to see him if we were going to go out on a date.
And you were focusing on the positives. You sure weren't looking at all his negatives, so you weren't going to want to be with him.
That's right. And so I just created a list and said, wow, I used to sit and be able to watch football for hours and actually care about the stats of so-and-so. I knew some of the players. I didn't think it was a big deal to spend a Sunday doing that,
just to be in his presence. And I
think that's hanging out with him.
You just want to be with him, whatever he's doing, and where you would take interest in the things that were of interest to him. And I think that becomes that whole area where we start to say, it's all about me. When we get married and get that ring on, it can become far more. And I have to say, it was in my life for way too many years. Your role is to please me instead of for me to look and say, how can I come alongside you on life's journey? How can I be that positive influence in your life and to do what God commands us to do of preferring Him over ourselves?
For sure. And I heard a funny thing that, a lot of marriage problems are caused because when they're actually in the marriage ceremony, they're just saying, I promise to love myself and myself.
Yeah.
You may kiss yourself. That causes a lot of trouble right from the beginning and exactly like that. So with that, Julie, I kind of want to go over a couple scenarios.
Okay.
And just hear maybe how you would respond to this. So here's the scenario. I have a really hard time respecting a man who's not acting as a spiritual head of the house. He never leads the kids in devotion. I never see him reading the Bible. He just doesn't take an active role. And if we're going to pray or we're going to do anything spiritual, I'm the one that has to lead it. What do you say to that woman?
Well, first of all, Jamie, I'd say that is a very common concern and complaint that I hear from people. And I think that the most important thing, again, is first start being grateful for what you do have. And focus again on the positives. That's always something. And to be grateful to God and look where you can affirm your husband. Secondly, I think the thing is, it is where you go to the Lord and you pray to Him and you ask Him, first of all, to give you patience, to give you strength, to give you what you need in that situation. Because love is not easily angered, as we know from 1 Corinthians 13. So instead of where you're getting upset and going, here I am giving the devotions again to the kids, my husband's never around, or he didn't get up and go to church again, is to look and to become the kind of person. I think probably that's it. And the reason a lot of times it's easier to grumble and complain than to work on yourself and to become the kind of person that your husband can be won in many ways without a word, where he says, wow, if that is what Christ has done to her life, I've seen such a transformation. She used to be the the grumbler and the complainer, and now she seems to have such a joy in her life and in her heart. I want to be around that. So I think a lot of it is, when I say work on yourself, it's allowing the Lord to do that work by submitting to what God says in that, Jamie, I think can make a big difference.
And don't you think, too, the power of prayer in praying that God would reveal to your husband's heart?
Huge.
Let God do the work, because if God has called the man to be the spiritual head of the house and he's not, say, stepping up to that role, it's in the will of God for him to be there. Pray and ask God to help make those changes
Critically
in his
important.
heart, because God can do things in people's hearts that we could never do.
Never, ever.
And so just praying faithful. And Julie, I know you've shared with me some stories of women who have prayed. I mean, it could take sometimes 20 years before a man can start attending church with his wife.
I remember, Jamie, as you say that, distinctly one woman, and it was 12 years, and she had been going to different Bible studies, and she had accepted the Lord, and she never even invited him to go. That was her routine, and he was acceptable, fine with her getting up and going to church, but he never went. And literally, it was after a 12-year period, she was getting ready, and she looks over at her husband, and he is getting ready to go to church, and he's getting, coat and tie on. And that probably doesn't happen in today's world that much, where it's the coat and tie, but it was back then. And she's like, well, where are you going? He goes, well, I'm going to church with you. And you just look and say, again, the excitement. And he ended up becoming a believer in Jesus, and his life was also transformed. But so much of it was, she didn't look to her husband to satisfy her needs. She looked to the Lord alone to satisfy her needs, and allowed the Lord to transform her again, so that he would want to become more like she had displayed him to be, of what a true Christian is.
And that is such a big deal. So moving on, I want to look at another scenario here. So my husband always starts projects and then doesn't finish them. For instance, he was going to fix the back patio. He tore it up, and now only half of it's finished, and it's going on 12 months.
Well, I'm glad to know somebody else ever has to deal with those unfinished products, Jamie. And unfortunately, sometimes it's me, not just my husband, on that. But I think there again, one of the greatest admonitions in the Bible is to speak the truth in love. And so I think when we have frustration, sometimes what we think is, we either do the grumbling and complaining, or we just get that passive-aggressive anger. So we're upset about it, and it's kind of like sticks in our craw.
Now, wait a minute. Now, who are you talking about? Are you saying that the female gets the passive-aggressive behavior?
Well, both can be, but I'm talking in this case.
Okay.
You might be the wife who is very irritated by your husband's lack of follow-through, but you might be passive-aggressive in how you respond to him being the one who hasn't finished the projects or hasn't followed through in what he said. And so sometimes you grumble, complain, you get into a yelling match, but sometimes it's a passive aggressive where you're just, there's a seething, that slow boil. It kind of depends on your personality. And I think it's always the place where speak the truth in love, and go to him at a place where you're not either outrightly angry, but where in your heart, and that's why going before the Lord first, and the timing of when you would speak that truth is going to determine in many ways of whether it really is loving. I mean, you're not going to want to catch him when he's just come home after a long day and he's exhausted and everything else. So it's that choose wisely, choose your timing wisely, but that might be the very time when you want to, say, honey, I know that, we've had this project that you'd started, and I just wanted to see, is there anything I could do to help you with that? Is there something that has really kept you from finishing it? And I know that, we talked about, let's assume you had, finishing that screened-in porch or whatever the project was, and I just wanted to say, is there a reason? Is it because there's, too much work that's going on or a load? Where can I come alongside you? And where you make it a joint project, or at least he knows you're in there supporting him, not there just nagging at him, Jamie. I think that's one of the ways. Are there other suggestions you'd have on something like that?
I think it's important that when you go, and this is a timing issue, so often I can tell you in my own marriage, I've really had to work on the fact that my timing isn't always his.
Yeah.
And so I would go, it could be after I put the kids to bed, and now I want to sit down and have a serious conversation. And sometimes his answer would be, honey, I care about this, but not now. I just don't want to talk about it now.
Right.
And I would not let it go. It was like, I need to get this off my chest, and you need to listen, and you are going to listen.
Oh, Jamie, I
My
know we
poor
were so
husband.
much alike. That just really scares me because I hear that so much in me,
Well,
too.
it's that demand, because for us, it may have been brewing for a while,
Right.
and it's like, well, now it's time, and we're going to talk about this now. But the value is in saying, okay, I can appreciate that you don't want to talk about this right now, but could you please tell me when we can? Because I want to write it in my calendar.
Well, and along that line, Jamie, I think one of the things that's so important is to date your husband. That intimacy and the respect that comes is from being together. It's like in any relationship. And once you have children in particular, it can become so easy that everything you do has to do with things that are, getting caught up on the day-to-day issues instead of really nurturing that relationship. And that is where both you will begin to respect him as you come into his world and ask him questions when you're going on a date. Find out the things and try and have fun. I mean, that was one of the things that my husband and I, and with 4 children, it was tough, but we made a concerted effort to say, all right, we're going to start dating each other. There's no more, and you've got babysitting expenses or whatever else, but that in the long run is going to be a huge way to protect your marriage, but to secure that place of respect as you're along with, coming alongside him there. And so I think that can also be a real important thing, Jamie.
And taking a test. Doing a test, taking, maybe a weekly temperature test where you just sit down with your spouse and say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10,
how am I doing?
How am I doing?
That's right.
And be willing to sit and listen and recognize, okay.
That's not when you go, I can't believe you gave me a 5.
I can't believe you just said that about me. No, this is to be constructive and to recognize that this is not a time for interruptions and for bashing back and forth. About who did what or whatnot. But it's really about openly being able to just sit back and take something in and really listen and hear. And listen and hear knowing, look, you've got your time, or maybe it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever that you spend doing this kind of back and forth. Your 5 minutes is coming up. Your 5 minutes is coming up.
Well, I think, again, Jamie, as we look at this, there's so much more we could talk about this issue because it's a huge one. And as we just think of marriages in general, and there's a lot of advice, and we can give some more tips even that you might be able to apply in your marriage on our website. If you go to that at trueviewministries.org, and if you want to look and see, there's a place that you can even give us suggestions on what it is that you might want to offer as ways in which you could demonstrate respect for your husband. And we just so appreciate that. I know that Jamie and I, even as we tune in more to our own marriages and think, how can I show respect, that we're going to be looking at ways, and I'm sure we'll have other ways that we can be talking to you about and bring those to you again. So thank you for joining with us today, and we look forward to having you join us on our next show.
And now, another adventure with Savings Man.
Let's live at the beach.
Let's golf every day.
How about a trip?
Season baseball tickets?
Sounds like you're planning for retirement.
Hey, Savings Man.
Are you saving enough?
We are, thanks to the easy ballpark estimate worksheet at choosetosave.org.
Hope you're saving for health insurance.
Absolutely, because health insurance is important. Thanks, Savings Man.
No, thank you. So visit choosetosave.org and get your ballpark estimate today.
What you doing, Dad?
My favorite thing.
Really, Dad, what are you doing?
Paying bills. Every month a stack of them come, just as regular as the rain.
What's this one?
That's a special one, son. I paid it first.
How come?
It's money for my retirement account. I put some money aside each month just like I was paying a bill.
Wouldn't you rather buy something?
I don't want to work forever, and I don't want you to have to support me in my old age. In a way, I'm buying peace of mind. I'm on the installment plan.
My little brother is thinking about retiring.
I went to socialsecurity.gov to get a retirement benefit estimate. It was so easy.
When it's time to retire, you can file online.
I knew that.
They grow up so fast.